My name is Bowden Kelly. I am a program manager on the TypeScript team at Microsoft. Um, I live in Redmond. Just came down here for the day, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm glad y'all decided to come out to hear about TypeScript. Obviously, I'm personally very excited about TypeScript, and we just released TypeScript 2.0 yesterday. I'm assuming every single one of you has already retweeted it. If not, pull out your Twitter machine right now. Go to typescriptlang.com. Just kidding. Anyway, so you saw Doris's talk. She was focusing kind of on the basics of why TypeScript, right? There's so many things you could be learning right now in the JavaScript world. It's really exploding. It's still the most popular language in the world, and it's growing so fast. I'm going to focus more on TypeScript in action. What does it mean to actually use TypeScript today in your project? So we're not going to be diving into crazy features. We're not going to even be skimming, breaking the surface of really, the basics of TypeScript. But you're going to see end-to-end in a React app and an Angular app, what does it mean to use TypeScript rather than JavaScript? And maybe what does it not mean? So with that, let's just go ahead and get started. So I'm here using a Mac. If you can't see, I'm on OS X. I'm going to be using VS Code like Doris did. But again, our tools are open source. They're cross-platform. You can use them on anything you want. And what you see here can be replicated really on any platform. And so to get started, we're truly going to be starting from scratch. I'll show you what version of Node I have. I'm working with the latest 6.6 Npm. Also, is everyone familiar with Npm? If not, it's just a package manager for getting JavaScript libraries. I highly recommend you check it out.
Can you move your terminal a little that way? It's cutting off digits.
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's see. There we go. And sweet.
Thank you.
All right. So to get started, let's see. We have a blank folder. We're going to call it ng demo. Truly starting from scratch. Angular 2 was released very recently. For anyone following Angular 2, anyone been playing with Angular 2 at all? If you have, they've made a lot of changes. It's kind of crazy. There's stuff going on everywhere. If you haven't, it's a little intimidating to get started with. And so one of the things they've done is released a CLI, a command line tool, that generates projects for you. This is called Angular CLI. You can install it with npm install angular-CLI. It takes a while because it downloads a lot of stuff, but I recommend you check it out if you try to do this at home. So we're just going to go ahead and get started by saying ng new and Reddit reader. We're going to be building a simple Reddit app that basically pulls images down. And so it's going to create a bunch of files. And while it does what it does, we can talk about the structure it's going to generate for us. And so again, here's VS Code. Do the same cutoff problem? No, we're good. And here's the Reddit reader app we just generated. And so looking at this, we can see they have a bunch of config files. Editor config is for basic stuff like tabs versus spaces. Git ignore is for ignoring files for Git. Angular CLI is basically what you just generated. Karma, this is testing related. There's a bunch of stuff. But really, most of it's not that important. And the perspective that Angular 2 takes is that there's a ton of stuff that you can do for modern web apps. And they're going to be prescriptive on how you should do it. This is how you should do routing. This is how you should do lazy loading. Everything that you could possibly do to build an advanced web app these days, Angular has a way that they think you should do it. React, which you'll see in a minute, on the other hand, is not prescriptive. They give you just a single piece. What they do it very simply, very elegantly, and very well. But they're not going to tell you how you should do everything else. But with Angular, that's why you see so much here. And the beauty of it is they will give you what you need to get started. It'll work out of the box. And kind of as you go, you can start discovering these things, reading about them, and editing them as you need. But from the get-go, you can ignore a vast majority of this. And so again, we have a package JSON. This is npm dependencies. And we have, README and tslint for linting. But really, all the bulk of the app is in source app, where they've generated us a app.module, which is the entry point for Angular. If you use previous versions of Angular, this is kind of the bootstrap process, how it sets it up. And we have our main component with a corresponding HTML segment. And if we go back and see if we are done, we're not done installing dependencies yet, because there are a lot. But we'll go ahead and make a couple edits just to get this thing going. So we'll switch this to TypeScript rocks and leave that as is. And just like that, what timing. So cool. With this, again, they give you all the tools you need to get running. You don't need your own server. They have one built into the Angular CLI. So we'll go ahead and just say, actually, instead of that, something you might run into a lot in web applications these days, if you're using npm and you have a package.json, what a lot of people are starting to do is add npm scripts. And basically, this is just a way of aliasing some commands that you'd normally be running from your command line. In this case, they have the ng-serve command, which launches their own development server. But we can run the same thing by saying npm start. And so that's what we'll do. And that won't work because I'm a rookie and didn't switch to the right folder. So we'll npm start. And again, the first time you do this is going to take a while. Just to show you how many dependencies get pulled in for all of the stuff we have, we can look inside the node modules folder and look at all of this JavaScript. Oh my God, look at all those packages. And we're still in the C's, right? I mean, like, this thing goes on forever. But it's important to note that you don't necessarily use all of these things, right? At runtime, you're not going to be including all of these in your bundle. They're going to be tree shaking, which basically means they're going to take the things you used, include them in your final app bundle. But again, the great thing about Angular, you don't need to know that. It doesn't matter. It's there if you need it. If not, they'll take care of it at build time. And you'll see here, they do a ton of stuff, right? Optimizing, module optimization, chunk optimization, like all of these things that I've probably never even heard of, but it doesn't matter. They're just going to do it, and it works. And that's really all we care about for the moment. And so we will pop open our local host, and sure enough, TS rocks. And so yeah, this is the basic way to get started with an Angular app. And it is the exact same way you do it with JavaScript or TypeScript. It's really the same. So nothing unique yet. So one of the things we can do is we can start looking at how we can pull in Reddit data instead of the default data we have here, or the TS rocks we just add. And so to do that, we can go to reddit.com/r/aw, and here is a subreddit of cute animals, right? Because, aww. Who can say no to that face? But what's even better is we can tell Reddit that, hey, I really just want the JSON. And so they'll give us all of the JSON that's powering their own page. And so we can then take that and throw it in VS Code. We'll call it raw data.json. Paste it. VS Code's really great for stuff like this. We can format it to make it readable. And now we have all that data that was powering that Reddit page. And so if we're going to make our own Reddit viewer, we need to get the same data out that we want. And so we don't necessarily care about all of this stuff, but we do care about some of it. And this is one of the places that TypeScript is super handy for web development. Traditionally, you could imagine you'd take this JSON blob, you'd parse it, you get some mega monstrous JavaScript object with every single one of these properties on it, when in reality, you only care about 5 or 6. In TypeScript, what you can do is you can model the shape of data or an object. And so that's exactly what we're going to do right here. So we're going to create a file called reddit.ts. I have a snippet that basically is going to do what you would do by hand, but basically you're looking at this raw data and you're converting it into the structure that you care about. So in this case, we have an interface that represents the shape of an object of this API response, or the raw data. And so you see we have data, children, data, right? And so sure enough, data, children, data. And then we have all the things that we might be interested in. So we're going to call each one of these a submission. And in the submission, we're only going to point out a couple things that we actually care about: the author, the domain, the title, the URL. Everything else, you know, it's just data. We don't really care what it is. And so we'll forget about it. Now that we know where this data is, we just need to make a HTTP request to grab it from Reddit itself. So we're going to go back to our app component. And we're going to let's see. There we go. Drop in a little bit of code that's going to make a JSON request or a HTTP request for us. And so let me walk you through this. In the constructor, we're basically requesting this JSON P, this object which is going to power our request. We get this from HTTP from Angular. Normally, you can just use the HTTP module. In this case, because we're doing some janky cross-site stuff with Reddit, there's like a bunch of security problems with it, so we kind of have to go around it. So instead, we had used JSON P module, but typically you would already have HTTP module loaded for you. And we're basically on ng-init, on page load, we're going to make a request to Reddit r/aw. We're going to take that data and we're going to map it to the API response. And I'm missing some imports. App component imports. And so here, of course, TypeScript's telling me I already messed up. Let's see. Observable submission is not assignable to string array. Thank you. This is old and can now be turned into an observable what did it say? Observable. This is why TypeScript's so great. I already forgot what the type was. Observable submission array, of course. So we're going to do observable submission array. And so Angular 2 uses observables for passing their data around. It's kind of complicated, but again, you don't really need to know the ins and outs just to use it. And that's what we're going to do here. We're just going to wrap this whole list in an observable, and that's just going to make a bunch of stuff magically work behind the scenes. But for our purposes, we're now going to say, hey, I'm going to get this response, this JSON response, and I want to call it an API response, that data shape we talked about earlier. And this is great because once I start working with this, I get IntelliSense for exactly the data I defined in the JSON response that I care about. So I have data here, I have children here, and when I go to filter this all out, I'm now left with just my submissions list that goes into the feed data. And so this is all great. And now that we have all this data sitting in the feed data, all we have to do is update our template to use that. And so, again, I prepared a snippet just for the sake of time. But basically, all we're doing here is displaying all of that data I previously defined. You have a URL, you have the domain, you have the title. The simple stuff out of this raw data that we wanted that we're now going to display in this Angular form. So with that, in the background, we've had this running over and over and over again. Every time you make a change, they redo this entire process. And so hopefully, we should be able to refresh this and nothing happens. Oh, of course. Forgot to update the app component. That will do it. Yeah. Or just didn't save. Sorry about that. All right. Here we go. So they're picking up on it. They're doing it again. They're real mad because I don't have Reddit. Which, did everyone see me add this like 2 seconds ago? I swear I just did this. All right, so we're going to re-add this. And bundle valid. Show me cute puppies. Oh my god. All right. You're going to get the surprise lesson on debugging this. Here we go. Yeah. Jason P, no provider. I did that too. Y'all saw me do this. All right, we're going to go back to our module where we had this HTTP module and we changed it to JSON P module. And we're going to do it again. Oh, JSON P. Thank you. Thank you, team. All right, here we go. This is what I get for using the latest Angular version that got released last week. Oh, man. That's there. Oh, man. What a joke. All right.
It's not just you.
Here we go. Getting nothing. All right. Show me cute puppies. There we go. Hey. Or cute goats. I can work with that too. All right. So what do we see here other than apparently I don't save my files ever? Nothing changes with TypeScript, right? This is exactly what you do with normal web development. You would do your thing with your framework. You would fight with your framework. You would do your thing with your tools. You would fight with your tools. But you just lay TypeScript on top of that. TypeScript doesn't really change anything other than your editing experience. You can, add optional types, as Dora showed. You can use ES6 features if you want. You notice Angular uses them extensively. If you're familiar with decorators, they use them for all of their class components in Angular 2. And all of this will be converted down to ES5 that's going to work in every browser. You don't really see that here because, again, Angular does a ton of stuff for you. They are doing all sorts of optimization and bundling behind the scenes. But you will see that when we do this again, hopefully more successfully in React. So let's do that. All right. So we're going to create a new folder, again from scratch. We're going to call it React Demo. And Because we don't have a template to start with and we're doing this all from scratch, there's going to be some extra config files we have to kind of create ourselves, and I'll walk you through those as we go. We're going to do npm init-y. This creates a package.json for us, and that's it. That's all it does. From there, we're going to start adding our dependencies. So we're going to do npm install, save jQuery, React, and React DOM. These are basically the 3 things you need to start writing React. And by npm install -- save, we're going to add them to our package.json. So if we go ahead and pop this open in code, we can already see we have our package.json, which has our 3 dependencies. And we have our node modules, which has the dependencies as well as their dependencies, which is why this list gets so big so fast. Now you're going to see the part of where we do add a little overhead with TypeScript. You need a tsconfig file. While Angular provided it, we need to add one here now. You can generate the basic default tsconfig with tsc -- init. This will create a tsconfig file with the very basic options. Because we're doing React, we need to add that we are using the specific React JSX style. The only other thing that we might add that I technically don't need for this demo, but based on how the last one went, we'll probably need debugging at some point, so we're going to go ahead and turn on source maps. Is everyone familiar with source maps? Is anyone not familiar with source maps? Basically, you have minified JavaScript a lot of time, and you want to debug it back to the original source. Source maps are basically the mapping from something different back to your source. So in minified case, you go from minified to JavaScript. In TypeScript's case, you go from JavaScript back to TypeScript. And so you can actually build chains of source maps where you have minified to JavaScript to TypeScript, such that you're running minified code in your browser, but when you go to debug it, you see your TypeScript source. All of that comes from source map true. That'll generate a source map file alongside your compilation. Oh, God. Thank you. And now we're going to create a index.html where everything starts from. And this is pretty basic. We're basically just going to pull in our dependencies. Explicitly, we have those in our node module folder, and we need to load them. And here we are loading this bundle.js, which we're going to use Webpack to generate our bundle with React. Again, React isn't specific on how you should build your code. You can do it however you want. A lot of people like using Webpack, and so that's what we're going to use just for the sake of no better option. And so now we'll get into the part where TypeScript's a little different again. Normally in React, you have the option of using JSX, which is this hybrid HTML, JS combo that lets you drop HTML tags directly in your JavaScript. Because this is all going through the TypeScript compiler, just like you need all your JS files to be named TS for the TypeScript compiler to look at them, we'll do the same thing with JSX to TSX. So we'll call this index.tsx. And here now we're going to go ahead and import all of those 3 dependencies that we just talked about. So we can say import star as $ from jQuery, and this is ES6 module syntax. If you are familiar with ES6 module syntax, it's more or less just another way of doing the same as common or AMD. The whole module thing that's going on in JavaScript right now is pretty crazy. I will say I wouldn't bother so much trying to understand how they work and why they're different and which one's the best. I would just do the one that you need to make your scenario work. That's kind of our opinion as TypeScript. We think that ES6 syntax is the best. It's the future of JavaScript. So when you're writing TypeScript, you always use ES6 module import export syntax, but then you omit whatever your tools need or whatever your environment requires. And that's one of the options listed in tsconfig. You have module, and by default, we omit common.js. It happens to be the most common, but a lot of times in AMD, in browser space, you have tools using AMD. And again, this only really matters if you're using different build tools. And in this case, because we're using Webpack, we're going to target CommonJS. But that is a common sense of confusion, source of confusion. That unfortunately won't be resolved until ES6 modules are fully supported by all browsers and everyone's kind of on the same page. But we're getting there. So again, we're going to import star as React from React, and then all we need is React DOM from React DOM. But here, we now have a problem. We cannot find module React DOM. But obviously, they're here, right? I mean, we downloaded them, and we referenced them in our index.html. So, I mean, they're going to be there at runtime, and we can use them right now. But TypeScript doesn't know what these are or where they came from. And this is kind of the one major point of using TypeScript that you have to do something significantly different than if you're doing JavaScript. Because in order to use JavaScript libraries with TypeScript, you have to tell the TypeScript compiler that they're there. Because otherwise, the TypeScript compiler looks for this type, Jquery, and it has, I have no idea what Jquery is, right? You give me one TSX file, and I don't have a Jquery anywhere in here, so I don't know what that is, even though we're supplying it as an external module. And so what we do in TypeScript is we have these DTS files, these TypeScript declaration files. And what they are is basically a definition of all the types that would be there if that entire library had been written in TypeScript. So you can think of it as the JavaScript plus a DTS equals a TypeScript file. And so in order to inform the compiler that, hey, I do have this Jquery thing, we're going to add a DTS file for it. And the nice thing is that the TypeScript community has already defined a very large number of these. You can see we have 2,100 here, and this is called Definitely Typed. It's a GitHub repository just full of TypeScript definitions. I mean, if we search, we can find, Jquery, and we can find all sorts of stuff. Basically, if you've heard of a JavaScript library, there's a good chance there's a TypeScript definition file for it. And up until recently, to get these DTS files, you'd use a tool like TSD or Typings to download them. Going forward, it's a lot easier. Just like you would install, I'm going to go use Jquery, so now I'm going to install it. In our case, we used npm to install Jquery. It's the same steps for Typings. And so I'm just going to say npm install --save dev at types Jquery. And what this is at types is a scoped package that we have published from Definitely Typed. And so we take all 2,100 DTS files that exist on Definitely Typed, and every night we publish them to npm under the @types scope. And so if you want to check for a package's typing or DTS file, you can just try to npm install @types, whatever the package is. And so if we do this, we pull down Jquery, and now inside of our node modules folder, we have this @types, and here we have this massive type definition for Jquery. But this is really cool. This is very powerful, because not only does this make TypeScript understand, why don't you understand? There we go. It's just being slow. So now we know what Jquery is, even though we don't know what React and React DOM are. But that's not just it. We know what Jquery is and all of the type information for all of its functions. And so if we do something like, $Ajax, we get really great IntelliSense on this. See, it tells us we need some kind of settings object, and I have no idea what Jquery Ajax settings are. But the beauty of it is that someone has defined what that is, right? So I can now, command click or control click on these things to go to the source, and now I see here's this Jquery Ajax settings. And these are all of the different settings that I could possibly pass into this function. This is stuff that you don't get with JavaScript. This is something that you'd have to go to the Jquery documentation and find it. And now it's all in your editor. It's all at your fingertips. You get, IntelliSense for it in the middle of your typing. And that's really powerful. It streamlines the information that you need and puts it in the place that is most convenient. And so we're now going to add the same for React and React DOM. And I'm just going to go ahead and preemptively reload the window because it forces the compiler to look at everything again. And we're good. So cool. Now that we have all of these things, TypeScript knows what they are, and we can start writing our code again as we would if this was just plain old JavaScript. So real quick, we'll just do React DOM render. Render takes a DOM element. So this is where we will use this JSX syntax. And we'll say P. And let's see what else it takes. It takes a element that you're targeting. That's right. So we're going to do document, get element by ID, and then we'll say, I believe it's content. Content. React must be imported from a module. What? Did I do this wrong? Let's just see what happens if we do it anyway. So we're going to do HTTP server. Pull this up. Of course. All right. Yeah, it might be it. Oh, nice. Again, I'm not a React expert, not an Angular 2 expert, but we're making it work. Oh, right, we need to webpack this stuff. All right, to build this, again, you have to install Webpack or some type of bundler for React. So you could just do npm install-g webpack. I already have it installed. And so all we need are Webpack's dependencies, which is kind of a pain that installing Webpack doesn't give you their dependencies, but that's an unfortunate thing we have to live with. And so we'll do npm install --save dev, source map loader, TS loader, and TypeScript. These two on the end are required for Webpack to do the TypeScript transpilation as a part of the bundling. We could make them separate steps. This just happens to be a little quicker and easier. And so we're going to do that. And now we can say, not quite yet, we need a Webpack config. Because JavaScript tools are brutally difficult. Again, I would just go find one of these on the internet. There's nothing special going on here. You just have to list a bunch of options for some reason. The only difference for TypeScript is that you're saying, hey, I care about TSX files, when previously it would just be JS. But you have to register extensions with Webpack. And so that's the only change you have to make. And so with that in place, we can just build with Webpack. Or I can destroy my config file. We can build with Webpack. I'm in the wrong directory, please. Can't resolve file directory, source index. Yes. Great spot. That should do it. There we go. All right, so what that did is it generated us this bundle.js in the distribution folder. And again, this is that bundle.js that we reference in our HTML. Again, this is all JavaScript, web world as you have it today. There's a million build tools out there, or you can just not use build tools. This just happens to be what a lot of React people use. So let's go ahead and run that with an HTTP server. And TypeScript rocks. There we go. Great. Now all we have to do is add Reddit, right? It was super simple last time. So let's make it happen. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add that same TypeScript file we had that was a description of the API information we were getting in. And so we can just reuse that same code. We're saying this is the same shape, same data. I can reuse this, right? This is only explaining the shape of an object. The next thing we're going to do because it's React, is we're going to create a React component. We'll call it React submission.tsx. And basically, this is the same as our Angular template was. We had the HTML in a separate HTML file. In React, you define your components in these JSX files or TSX files using the same React-like setup or JSX syntax. And so we can say, just drop some of this in here. I can walk you through it. So here we have our component. Again, you notice this is just HTML. That's what JSX does. It lets you drop this in the middle of a JavaScript file. And as you can see, we're creating this as almost of an object, like a reusable component. And React is really pushing for this in the same way that Angular wanted you to have these class components that were standalone reusable parts. React wants you to do the same kind of composition with these React components. And so this is the same kind of deal we had earlier, where we have just the submission information that we have from Reddit coming in, and we're just displaying it in a HTML component. The only difference, if you remember in the Angular component, we did a star ng4, which iterates over all of the submissions we had. In React, they do it a little differently. They pass in props. And so we have to add the element position, whereas we got it out of the index from the for loop previously. We need to receive that index from React via a prop. And so again, this is a little TypeScript at work. We can say that we have this submission, and I want to turn it into the submission plus the props, and just add an element position to that. And you'll see when we dump in the full display Reddit function, here we have that element position coming in as the index of all of the components, the list of components. But anyway, back to that's really all we had here. And so when we're displaying this, we're doing the same thing we did in the Angular app. We're just going to use Jquery instead to do the call, the HTTP request. Again, React doesn't care how you make your HTTP request. You can use whatever you want. And so we are going to use Jquery. We're going to hit the same, reddit.com r/aw. We're going to get this response just as we did. We're going to say, hey, this has the shape of an API response, so that we get that same experience of, it not working. Huh. Well, can't explain that one. And then these squiggles are my lack of imports, so we'll add those real quick. All right. And cool. All right. And we're missing one more React submission that comes from the submission component itself. And we're all clear. All right. So again, we're doing the same thing. We pull all the data out. We filter it to get the stuff that just has pictures. This is all just kind of implementation detail on getting the data we want and filtering it out. And then we're going to drop it in this React component that we defined over here, and we're going to pass in that property that we needed. Finally, we're going to render the component and call the function to display everything. And after running Webpack to compile and bundle, HTTP server to run the server, cross your fingers for puppies. Yeah, there we go. I would like to point out that when we started this, pudding was number 2, so I'm assuming all of you out there have been upvoting pudding throughout this entire demo. But yeah, again, so the point of this turned out to be fairly painful. A lot of you can empathize with that because web development these days kind of is. But the point is, your tools don't change, your libraries don't change, your JavaScript doesn't change. You just lay TypeScript on top. Anywhere that a tool says, hey, I need TypeScript, you just say, hey, I need, or anywhere it says, hey, I need JavaScript, you say, I need JavaScript and TypeScript. Anywhere where you previously had JavaScript code, whether it's JS or JSX, you can now have TS or TSX. And it's all optional. You can put in types if you want. You can define the shape of your data so that you get better tools on it if you want, but you don't have to. If you just want to use TypeScript so that you can read the documentation of Jquery from your editor, you can do that. And it's very simple just to lay that on top. Not much else changes. And so yeah, that's all I got. Thank you so much for bearing with me through that demo, and hope you stick around for Q&A.